Hello, 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 and welcome to our wonderful opportunity to connect with three professionals that I had the good fortune of working with last week by attending the CIO Peer Forum. Our first guest today is Helen Knight. Helen fights poverty with technology, leading award-winning transformations and designing and implementing strategic technical change for social service organizations, large and small. Helen is the Vice President of Information Technology for Legal Aid Alberta, is an advisor to the Canadian Centre of Nonprofit Digital Resilience and Charity Navigator, lectures at the University of Calgary Haskayne School of Business, and serves on the CIO Association of Canada Board. Helen is an active advocate for increasing gender diversity in technology as a founder of Tech Lead Her, an instructor on digital careers for the Propeller Experience, and a volunteer with Making Changes Association Women in Technology program. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you. Our second guest is Ross Valentine. He's the VP of Information Technology. Ross began his career in finance leadership roles before moving into the IT domain. As a CPA, Ross has a high degree of understanding and empathy for the users of technology solutions, and he believes that technology should be delivered pragmatically and as a direct enabler of business value and strategic business objectives. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you very much, Patty.
Last but certainly not least is my friend Sean Guthrie. He's the Senior Vice President of Technology and E-commerce. Sean works at PV Industries, which is across Canada and whose banners include PV Mart, Ace Canada, and Main Street Hardware, which primarily serve farm and ranch customers. In addition, Sean is very active in the local and Canadian technology community, serving as the National Vice President of the CIO Association of Canada and as an advisory board member for IDC Canada. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Patty.
You know, I was privileged to attend and deliver the closing keynote for the CIO Peer Forum on May 31st. The CIO Association of Canada brought CIOs together from all over Canada under the umbrella of adaptive leadership, and I thought it would be a really great opportunity for digital dialogue to tap into some of the takeaways, discussions, and hot topics that occurred last week at this incredible event. So let's start with you, Helen. What would be your biggest takeaway from this gathering of IT professionals from across Canada?
So many, honestly. What I love about the CIO Association events is it's so beyond networking. It's really about connection. It's like a meeting of friends solving problems together instead of some of the colder, more static events that we CIOs get invited to a lot. But the greatest takeaway was the presentation by Gaetano, the CIO of Red Deer. He did an incredible presentation. It's pretty hard to get a standing ovation at a CIO event, but he did. He spoke about autism, his own journey with it, advocated for the possible 10% of people with autism that are working within our organizations and neural complexity, especially in the IT department, gave us a lot of tools for how to work with and support, as well as really opened, I think, many of our eyes into how that diversity increases our collective intelligence and will make our solutions better. So just mind-blowing presentation. I loved it.
It was mind-blowing, and as someone who's neurodivergent myself, it was very impactful and brought tears to my eyes, to be honest with you. And next to Sean, what would you say are your takeaways, biggest takeaways?
Oh, I would agree with Helen, but I mean, Helen, communicated that eloquently. My biggest takeaway wasn't necessarily any of the, the technical sessions or any of the sessions that were about technology. It was really around one of the breakout sessions by 𝗤𝗄𝗯, the Chief Innovation Officer at WSP Global. And it was really around the soft skills as us as leaders that, how do you create that headspace to foster innovation? And Jazz talked a lot about his ability to meditate and just make time for himself to kind of absorb and read and use those methodologies to create that headspace
I
and creative. And I thought that that was a huge takeaway. And just even to think about things about, what are the meetings that you're attending and the challenge? Do I really need to be in this meeting? Do I need to, overstep my team? And my team could probably handle a lot of those meetings. And so it was a great reflection of, trying to be the best version of yourself. And I thought that was one of the biggest takeaways for me.
It was. And when I talked to him afterward, he said he hired a third-party group to really help them with their largest transformations and really brought in important learnings on emotional intelligence and social intelligence. It was a great breakout. And Ross, how about you? What was your primary or the main takeaways for you from the event?
Yeah, I mean, those comments from Helen and Sean are outstanding. I mean, the tunnel presentation, it was the second time that I've seen it. It's incredibly moving. It's very thought-provoking around what it means to be a leader and not allow yourself to be drawn into that cubbyhole of technology. It's much broader than that. And I think that's also one of my takeaways. And you even heard Sean say it when you introduced the idea of meditation and how to turn up as your best self. I think my greatest takeaway when you add it all up is really the diversity of what it means to be a technology leader today. It goes way beyond racking and stacking servers and blinky lights and into spaces of diversity, self-care, into areas where you really have to look at how you're turning up for your team, how you're bringing the best out in people, and of course, how you're talking to your executive and your board. So the stakeholders today that IT leaders need to be aware of and sensitive to are so much more broad than they have been in the past, and the diversity of thought that we have to bring in the areas and disciplines that we have to be able to move into and be credible in is very, very expansive today. And I think I was really struck by that from the sum of the session.
I agree. It was quite incredible to watch the conversations around how the role of the CIO has evolved. I'm going to throw this back at Sean a little bit. And let's chat a little bit about the key challenges that we face now as CIOs or tech leaders in these roles.
Yeah, I think the pandemic did a fantastic job for the profession of the CIO. If I can bring back the pandemic, nobody really wants to bring back the pandemic, but it truly did elevate our roles, right? It elevated our roles from I think highlighting just how crucial the CIO role is when it comes to everything that happens in an organization. And so obviously there's a tactical component, but I think a lot of CIOs, technology leaders, saw an opportunity to help organizations go beyond just, as Ross said, the blinky lights, and really find different avenues of generating revenue and different avenues of generating business value. And I think the challenge now, beyond the pandemic, is how do you continue that? How do you continue to generate value and keep that earned seat at the table? We've talked about it so many times prior of how does a CIO earn the seat at the table, and it's earned because you're talking the language of the business and you're developing business value and you're measuring that value and you're delivering against that. And I think that is that's, in my opinion, that's how we're moving ourselves forward in that profession and how we're generating value for the organization. I
agree 100%. The voice of the business is understanding that language. Helen, how can you expand upon how you see, because you're in a slightly different world, you're in the nonprofit world, and I would love to be able to hear how you feel the CIO role has changed.
So the CIO role has not changed as much in nonprofit as I dreamed that it would. We're definitely behind corporations. I was really excited when I saw a very large international energy company, the executive transformation of the CIO ascending to the CEO. I do see that as the way of the future, whereas it used to be pretty frequently the CFO or the COO who would move into that CEO position. The CIO is now being seen in private enterprise in many ways as a true partner, strategic enabler of the business. Within nonprofit, where I try to drive the value, one, I won't accept any job that reports to finance, has to be in partnership with the CEO and appear at the executive table to make sure that the decisions are informed in the right way. And two, strategic planning is a huge part of nonprofit work, often with their very diverse boards of prominent leaders. What I had seen when I started in nonprofit a decade ago was the strategic plans were built based on the top things they wanted to do to advance mission. However, there were significant technical barriers preventing them from advancing the mission in that way. So their plans would hit an impasse over and over again. So now I'm really excited to partner in the strategic planning space about presenting, this is our current state, these are our challenges, these are the opportunities for the future. Let's talk through all of the ways you want to enable and advance mission for this nonprofit organization and sequence it based on how we can also sequence and elevate the technical ecosystem so that we're working together. And then I'm seeing a lot more success in realizing the strategic plan, and the technology department isn't seen as that barrier. It is truly a partner who can multiply mission.
Oh, I love that. And I think there's a lot of nonprofits out there that could really listen to that one bit of knowledge in terms of how they can really become a part of, because technology now is the underlying enabler of all things business and otherwise. Ross, what do you see as some key challenges you face in your current role?
You know, it's also a takeaway from the peer forum. Whenever you put more than two IT leaders together and they have a conversation, you start to realize that a lot of the challenges are actually the same. It really depends on, I mean, it scales across organization size, it scales across the complexity of the technology platforms that they run. And one of those challenges is always this idea of avoiding the trap of becoming an order taker. And Helen articulated it really well about being involved in the strategic planning and having that ability to inform the forward conversation around technology within your organization. While at the same time, we have a healthy component of our work that is operational. And, you know, I really hate the phrase keep the lights on, but it is to some degree what we have to do. Ultimately, you know, you can be as strategic thinking and forward thinking as you want to be, but if things aren't working today, that's catastrophic to the business. And so there's this tug of war that happens, and depending on what's happening at any given time within the particular industry or business that you're working in, or even with the technology estate that you're maintaining and operating, the tug of war will pull you from one side to the other, where you're on one hand you're strategic, on the other hand you're operational. You have to move very nimbly between those two sets of conversations, between the stakeholders that are party to each of those conversations. And that mental agility is something that I think has come to define IT leaders. Certainly the IT leaders in my peer group in Canada all you know, reflect that in spades. And it's just that ability to be part of the conversation that's relevant at the time, whether it's strategic or operational, and how to deliver that. But I would, you know, to concisely answer your question, I would say it's this battling this stigma of the order taker and really fighting for and maintaining that seat at the strategic table.
Nice. You know, when I was listening to conversations last week, I heard a lot about the push for automation and the struggle and the balance of the push for automation with the limitation of legacy systems. Sean, I'm going to throw this back at you in terms of, you know, balancing that push for automation when an organization still has legacy systems. And then I'm going to move to jump over and chat with Helen about that, because I know she's got a hot hot bit of information about how she feels about legacy systems.
Uh, in retail, we have a lot of legacy and technical debt, and it is an incredible challenge because you're getting constantly pushed with new technologies and cloud-based solutions, but we still have the good old AS400. It is a good working horse, and it does what it needs to do, but it also is incredibly hard to automate against. So, I think for us, we make the best out of what we have, given the current economic climate. We can't just make it. What do you call it? Wave a magic wand and make that all disappear. So, we look at innovative ways of how do we leverage the existing technology. How do we interface with that in a way that that allows us to be a little bit more flexible? So one way that we're doing that is we're creating kind of I'll call it a faux API in front of the AS400, so that at least we're hitting kind of a modern endpoint that other systems are able to use. We don't care what happens in the back end with the batch processing, but it allows us to be a little bit more nimble. And what I'll say is that everything that we do when it comes to automation, and when we look at these things, one, it has to be documented. We have to understand the process. I'm sure we'll talk about process maybe a little bit later, but if we do not understand the process and have it fully documented, we are not automating it. And so that kind of pushes a little bit back of that responsibility to the systems owners and the functional business leaders and their organization and their process. And then we measure that. We make sure that if we're going to automate something, we measure it. We have KPIs that allow us to see how well did we do, and did we actually achieve those results that we said we were going to do. And so that's kind of where our automation journey and the limitation with legacy stands.
Helen, I'm going to throw this over to you because we chatted a little bit about the challenges within nonprofit organizations across the board when it comes to both the investment and the ability to move technology forward. Can I throw that at you?
Yes, absolutely. So many of the nonprofits that I've worked with throughout North America have been built like Winchester Mystery House. No architecture, no plan, just spontaneous room idea, idea to solve this individual problem, creating fragmented data sources and this weird application architecture without platforms. So with limited resources, I have to decide quite often, am I going to automate the bad stuff to make it faster, or keep it bad and focus on implementing platforms to create the opportunity for the single source of truth and build the applications within it? I do have challenges with even some of the ways that very large software companies push their automation applications, assuming there's a healthy ecosystem. And then it's so appealing to people that are really innovation focused. I put the no in innovation because there's usually snakes under the rug. I can't be focusing on putting in a greenhouse on the roof. I need to rebuild the entire foundation into an effective office building instead of this hodgepodge shed place. So I'm slow on automation because first I need to facilitate moving the organization into an environment we can effectively automate, where I don't have the increased cost of ownership that wasn't anticipated. And now when the logo changes, I have to change it in 48 different places. The calculation of automation, the timing, and even realizing pretty changes quickly versus more, meaningful, less celebrated changes. We have to have the discipline as executives to not chase the fun, cool thing or the fun, cool vendor and make a really meaningful impact in the time that we're partnering with the organizations that won't be understood, but is setting the path for the future. Because fast solutions to problems, I'm going to echo, I totally agree with Sean's statement about documentation. Please don't leave it to the technical team to make the decision. If you can't write down exactly what happens, it's 100% of the time, it cannot be automated.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, or we'll be wrong.
Great advice. I see Simone popped up with my the Winchester Mystery House analogy, which is something in our private conversations that Sean has mentioned. So I think it's really critical that we understand some of those strategies. I'm going to throw it over to Ross. And Ross, what are some of the ways that our listeners can integrate new automation technology without disrupting existing workflows?
Right. I think part of it is you have to look at what the value is. Oftentimes people consider automation to mean that it feeds into new things in the overall technology platform. So in order to automate, we're going to need to either switch from a legacy system to a newer system, or we're going to need to somehow renovate much more within our technology estates so that we can automate. And I think, for me, what it really comes down to is that the data, and how much am I going to concern myself with where that data sits, whether it's in a legacy system, whether we renovate that and move from an on-prem to a SaaS system. Really what I'm after is the soft chewy middle, which is the data within that system. And that's really, when you think about automation, it's about how you move data from one place to another, potentially enriching it along the way. But it's that movement of data, and the actual source to me is less important than the ability to move it. Sean mentioned APIs. API-enabled systems I want to say is kind of a table stakes. So if your systems are not API enabled, it's well worthwhile to come up with some kind of proxy or facsimile that at least creates that functionality. So I really appreciated that. Automation, I'm with Helen. We're slow on automation, and I actually leverage the need to get the process right that we've heard talked about here, where you're not going to automate a process until you're 100% satisfied that the business users that are part of that process understand what that process is, have made it repeatable, and it's a clean process. Because automation is not going to think unless you're really investing some serious dollars in machine learning and AI-based automation. It's going to be very rules-based, and it's going to rely on a repeatable process. And so that takes time. It takes time for business users, for business folks to actually map their processes, understand where they need to be re-engineered, what they want that final process to look like. And I use that time to bring my team into that conversation and understand how that process is shaping up, and how we might design a pragmatic automation that's going to meet the needs of the business and move data from where it needs to be. So it's about understanding you've got to have the process up front. The time required to do that is actually a gift to the technology team, because that's where you get your time to think, you get your time to plan, and if done properly, you get to be part of that conversation, and you get to watch how it's shaping up, and maybe periodically speak into it a little bit and help define what the colors and shape of that ultimate process look like, and then you bring the automation in at the end.
I could maybe just add one point to Ross. I was reading a book on vacation the end of March, and it was around projects, and one of the key aspects of the book was think slow to act fast. And I think that in the analogy that they used, or not the analogy, but one of the projects that they did, is they talked about the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building had every single piece documented right down to every single bolt. And I can't remember the exact timing, but it was something like, once they had that all documented and once they started building, it was a story by week. Every week they were adding a story to that building, because they knew exactly how many bolts they needed, and they were able to go fast. So put it into our perspective when it comes to talking about processes, like, you need to really understand that process and have what I would call more of a process-driven roadmap than kind of a tactical roadmap. And if you can do that, then you will be able to go fast with that knowledge.
I love that. you know, when we walked into the peer forum last week, we were expecting a lot of rah, Gen AI, rah, AI, tons of conversations. And everything I'm hearing from both of you and from Helen is that, you know, you've got to have your ducks in a row. Your processes and your data need to be very intentional and thoughtful. I know, Sean, you have described to me before a specific use case for how Gen AI has been implemented to solve some critical business problems in your organization. Do you want to jump back in and just
well, if we must talk about Gen AI, I think, you know what, it is fascinating, and one of the areas that we've leveraged it is on our web merchandising. So we have roughly 35 to 40,000 SKUs within our organization, and you can think about all the different attributes, all the different not images, but images or something else. We're not using Gen AI to create images for the products, but all those attributes and all the product description, the romance copy, that has to be updated on a regular basis, and we don't always get it in a timely fashion from our vendors or our suppliers. And so one of the tools that we use is we use Gen AI to do some backfilling of that information where there's missing information. And what's neat about it is it really understands all of the kind of our own farm and ranch vernacular. And so when it's generating the description, it's doing so in kind of our language. And that has been a huge increase for us as we re-implemented the PIM, which is our product information management system. We've seen an increase in the time spent that people are spending on our website because of this. And there was a very clear increase in time because we have better content. And what that translates into is a lower abandoned cart rate and a higher conversion rate. And so that's just one kind of use case for us. But you know, it took us a little while to figure it out because it was so new, and we're just experimenting, trying to figure out where do we actually use this? And I think that was one of the things that we heard at Peer Forum with just, you know, what are the use cases for AI? And what I would suggest to people is just keep trying, keep failing, just keep trying it, and you will eventually figure out a use case that will work for you. And don't be scared of it. I think there's a great opportunity.
I love that. I like this question. We certainly don't want to do the wrong thing faster, but when are we going to be satisfied? We don't want to automate a bad process. Can you ever be 100%? You know, like you've got to decide where is that cutoff line. So what about agile AI concepts? Anyone want to jump in on this one?
Just in terms of like, if we focus on the word agile, AI is a thing, but if we focus on agile, I mean, as Sean was talking about that particular point, I'm really glad that Simone brought that up, because I think, Sean, you know, your comments could be taken almost as being sort of overdone, over rigid, in the sense that it's breaking down, documenting everything, the Empire State Building example, etc. And I don't think that's really what you meant. And I think if I may, and certainly please comment, but I think there's a need to understand, when you're looking at automation and agility, what it is you're automating and what the criticality of it. There's a difference between automating the movement of data to facilitate a business process and automating the movement of data to facilitate public financial reporting. I mean, there can be criticality differences in terms of what the exactness is and the standard that you're held to. One can be agile. There's nothing wrong with a throwaway when it comes to automation. Maybe you start out building it with a particular tool. It's not meant to have a long life. It's meant to really only prove that you can automate it and move the data, and you'll come behind later and replace it with something more durable. But you know, to me, there's agility, but you have to be sensitive to what the ultimate use case is for that data, who the audience is, and what kind of decisions are going to be made off that data, and you have to respect that. Sean, I don't want to jump on your comments there. That's just
that's great.
I think they're differently applicable in different times, right? Sean's approach, 100%. We've all been in environments where that is absolutely the right way to move forward,
Yeah.
as are yours, Ross. When you were speaking, I was thinking about, when you have a really complex environment. 1,000 years ago, when I was on the help desk, and I, supporting 3,000 apps, and had to spend 30 minutes opening up all these different screens to be able to begin to support 1,400 users around the world, an internal chatbot would have been spectacular. And even if it was half wrong, it would have been less wrong than me for the first couple months of that job. So I think, to the great question, there are tons of great use cases for agile AI. It's having the discipline to think through the total impact and make the decision with consideration of stakeholders, privacy, risk. Even some of our nonprofits have been given free offers by companies that want to train their Gen AI on our data. I'm very thankful that our information security officer did some digging on one of them to identify that, they would own it, is what was written into the contract. So we're talking about vulnerable people data. So even free agile AI that sounds like no risks. The calculation, it seems like it can never be big enough, but you sure better make it robust as you can before
That
you.
idea of data ownership, like the amount of care that we need to spend right now in our contract evaluations. I mean, you have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We see data ownership assertions in contracts from not just the providers of the solutions that we're purchasing, but also from customers. I mean, it's kind of coming from everywhere, and then there's an implicit data ownership for employees. We are the custodians of their privacy and their security, and so there's definitely an ownership conversation there about their identity. But that's a really interesting one, Helen, for sure.
I'm going to keep us all on the screen because I want to throw some things out there, and I'd like you to banter back and forth, because I think there's some barriers to AI adoption, and we'll get off the AI bandwagon soon, but there are some barriers to AI adoption that I think really were discussed over the weekend, and I think it's important that we jump into some of those. Do you want to start us off, Ross?
I think, and this, I don't know how unique this is to me, especially after listening to Sean and Helen talk about this. And I'm left with the thought, listening to their comments about this proliferation of use cases, and this sort of, I'll insert the word rapid, but this rapid experimentation idea. To me, the challenge has actually been the use cases. So it depends, I think, on the available funding that you have, the capital that you can commit, the resources that you have internally. Not all use cases are created the same, and I certainly have a sense, and I'm open to being educated here, but I certainly have a sense that if you get the use case wrong, it can be expensive, it can be impactful. There's it's everything from, okay, you've wasted some money, hopefully not that much, hopefully it hasn't taken you that long to do, so it's a rapid fail, which is great. But I know that, as we introduce generative AI into our organization, I want it to land with credibility and trust. And I don't want to have something happen there where, people are looking at it going, okay, well, great landing, wrong airport. Like, I'm not really sure what you're trying to do here. We can't use this data, but we get what it's supposed to do. So good job. That's not really where I want to be. So I've been focused a lot on use cases, and as with, if you go back in the day with cloud, and the stories that the cloud providers had, the vendors had at the time. I'm going to use the word vendors. It's a horrible word, but I'm going to use it. Now, when you talk to service providers and vendors about Gen AI, you're getting very much the same conversation. It can do anything. It can do whatever you want. It can do it in any way you want to do it. The way they did the exact same use case, you can do it completely differently if you want to. It's just that flexible. And so this promise and this hype is absolutely massive. I agree. It's moving through the hype cycle far faster than any other technology that we've seen in the past, but the hype is still there, and it's not helpful. And you can go to people who have done generative AI projects, who sell generative AI solutions, and say, listen, help me line up with the use case. And the conversation usually starts with them saying, well, what use case do you want to do?
Hmm.
And my reply is, but that's why we're here. I want you to, like, talk. I'm in a transportation company. We're of a certain size. Here's our market. Here's what we do. Let's talk about transportation use cases. Okay, but which one do you want to try? And it just goes around and around and around. So that's kind of where I've landed, and that's my struggle. My big struggle is really that use case definition, because I really want to get that right. Am I overthinking it, guys? Do you think? I mean, I don't know.
I don't think so. I think that I think you really need to get clear and understand. You know, I made this comment before in other conversations, to really understand how your business runs. And I think if you were talking about it, Ross, just a little bit there, you know, versus we're in transportation and this is what we do. But I think that the technology leader really needs to understand what it is that the organization does. And I think if you start small with your, you know, instead of trying to boil the ocean, I think that's what everyone thinks that they're, you know, I gotta use Gen AI for all these different things. It can be something super small and build upon it. Use it as kind of like that flywheel that always constantly re-innovates on itself. And you can do that. You can build slowly, and it's just, I think what we have to do is we have to be master deflectors almost, is like kind of keep, you know, the wolves at bay, so to speak, so that let us get this one done, and let's kind of iterate on it, and we'll get to yours. But, like, you know, I think we're just getting inundated with all these different challenges. And if you start small, get the win, and then build upon that win, then you can slowly start scaling up your team. It's no different than we're trying to build a center of excellence here with automation within the organization, because once we prove, you know, and automation is kind of a subset of AI, but, you know, with automation, we built, you know, kind of the one use case, and people are just like, oh my God, you can do this. And then it's like, let's do this, this, and this, right? So.
I was thinking when you were speaking as well, everyone loves the omelet bar more than the omelet from the steam tray, right? Even though you're still limiting me to only red peppers and ham and 2 kinds of cheese, it still feels like I participated differently.
Yeah.
So maybe we can even brainstorm on what the parameters are, and you invite the executives to nominate something that fits within that. So what is internal and low risk and already has, you know, it's not working great. Come up with 5, 6 parameters and invite them to participate, because there are so with the adoption of Gen AI, holy cow, we need to create ways for our executives to partner with us, because if not, they're going to take their credit card and go partner on their own.
Yeah.
Because it's so exciting and it's so novel and it's amazing. Like, I use it multiple times a day. It's nice for me. It says sweeter things, honestly, to start emails. And then the way that I'm dealing with it within legal aid is, I can't speak to the world of AI. I can't speak to the mythology, the speed, the change. What I can speak to is within the Microsoft 365 environment, within Teams, the benefits of premium licensing and Copilot, and these are the parameters and these are the risks. And do you want to be a part of the beta test? And so that's my use case right now. It's pretty small. Probably most orgs are, you know, 6 months ahead of me, but it is a way for them to participate in Gen AI. And man, do I love the task list. It's better than what I write down.
That's fantastic. I think too that we're, you know, a lot of what I've heard from all of you, both last week and during this call, is the importance of understanding the value of the business outcomes and why we're doing this. You know, what is the core reason? What are we trying to solve? And that one of the things that I think we need to caution organizations on is, if you're paying more attention to competing in the AI race with other competitors, you are allowing technology to become the master, as opposed to the business becoming the master and using the technology to take it forward. But technology and Gen AI isn't the only thing. Like, there's a lot of converging forces that we're talking about that are pushing you at an accelerated rate. The overall criticality for organizations right now have some other challenges, and they are being driven slightly by new technology and what our needs are. Let's chat a little bit about some of those challenges. Ellen, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah.
No?
I don't. No, I'm excited to hear what my peers have to say.
Yeah. Okay. I think around talent is one of them, right? So
yeah, that's talent is the conversation, and there's hard talent, hard skills, right? This is the qualifications list. This is what we need for this particular project, etc. And those are the things that you can reduce down to an order with a recruiting firm. But let's talk about outside IT and talent. These technologies are beginning to span the enterprise more and more. The concept of digital literacy comes up in a big way. Recruiting for it, hiring for it, teaching it for folks that are within the organization now, and equipping people to engage with these technologies in a way that, Helen used the word myth earlier, and or mythical, and that's exactly what it is. If digital literacy within an organization is generally low, it's very difficult to have that authentic conversation with stakeholders about what the value proposition is of a given technology, particularly an emerging technology that an organization's never seen before. You kind of have to be able to imagine it, which requires a certain amount of literacy. So I would say digital literacy, even and especially outside of IT, would be a huge topic right now.
I want to add on. I knew I'd have something with it adding in. What I'm surprised with is some of the new hires with really great modern skills and master's degrees in comp sci are coming in without M365 backgrounds because they have a Google background. I'm not paid by Microsoft to be here. Just in many organizations, that's kind of the technology there. So the digital literacy even goes beyond it to the reality of the systems that you're using internally that we forget. I need to develop a program for just bringing them up to speed. Like, here's part of your onboarding is 4 optional hours of training on Outlook and Calendar, because I can't have you emailing me to ask when I'm available. And then back to the skills and education, I'm actually getting pretty concerned. Some of the courses that are out there right now, you can take a 12-week BI course without any data background. Like, are those people then going and getting jobs? Because that is the worst thing that we could be doing to our IT organization. Like, there's this foundation piece, the same place where, in order to recognize mistakes before we reach for innovation, some of the training and the digital skills, the post-secondaries are appealing to the marquee things that without the foundational expertise, and that's going to be a real big mess in the future.
And maybe I'll dive a little bit deeper on the digital literacy aspect and kind of focus maybe on the data literacy. I think, if you think about data and the gobs and gobs of data that organizations collect, I think we need to really understand, what are we doing with all that data? Are we collecting more than we actually need? Because if we are, we could be at more of a risk. And I think it's more important for the organization to be smart with data. It's not just, Helen talked about students coming out of I think it was a 6 or 12-week course in BI. I think we need to have good data governance. We need to have good data clarity, or sorry, not data clarity, but clean data. Excuse me. And we need to really understand what we're doing with that data. What's the decisions that we're going to make from that data? You can't just have data and reports for the sake of having data and reports. It has to actually lead to an action. And I think that's another area when it comes to that digital literacy, is that data literacy and getting smart with data.
So a follow-on comment to that, Sean, I think you're spot on there. But I think a capability that we need to think about within our organizations as well is this idea of storytelling. Because again, if you imagine data on its own is a very sterile thing, and surprisingly open to interpretation depending on on how you present it, how you interpret it, how you know, even in this conversation, right? There's, let's say, two people in a conversation. I can say one thing and you'll hear something completely different. We all have filters that applies to data as well. The thing that kind of breaks down that filter within the human brain is really the storytelling. The engagement is at such a deep level. So, you know, it could be argued that, you know, to Helen's point, you don't want people taking BI courses that don't have a data background, but as well, you really don't want BI people that don't understand how the brain interprets visualizations, or BI people that are unable to actually create a visualization that tells a compelling story. There's a second step that needs to happen there, really around the visualization. It takes milliseconds to interpret a widget, and the widget needs to tell a story. So there's a certain art and skill there as well that becomes very important. Otherwise, it's really just a conversation about technology for the sake of technology, and you find yourself very quickly back in that nuts and bolts conversation about what the tech can do for me. Without that story, it becomes very challenging to get to the true value proposition of why are we doing this, the capital W, why.
Totally agree. And the foundation is science, but the top half is art.
Right.
And that's our challenge, to collaborate effectively with the people that don't necessarily think science.
Right.
I need to learn about storytelling. I'm entirely statistically based. It was only by working in nonprofit that I really began to understand the importance of it to land. It's not what works with me.
I think the that leads into a couple of things: the soft skills, the ability to interconnect and build relationships, the interconnection of who we're connected with across the organization, the vendors, the customers, the you know, other teams that we serve and must work with interdependently. You know, there was a question here from Jessica that asked, how have you been able to help your organizations create a sustainable data management program? Anyone want to jump in?
Can you come back in 2 years?
That is huge. We're in the infancy of our journey, and for us, where we started out was around data ownership and data dictionary, data glossary is really understanding all the different data elements that we collect, who owns that, who makes the decisions. And another aspect that when I came to this organization is like, okay, so you're calculating EBITDA. Well, that's maybe a bad example, but you're calculating turns, or you're calculating GMROI. How are those calculations made, and what are the data sources? Because you go ask this person, they'll tell you it's done this way. You go ask that person, and it's done that way. And so getting clarity on exactly you know, who owns what, how it's calculated, and having a common understanding. So we're kind of that's where we're starting our program. There's much more to it than that, but that's where we're starting. So as Helen said, come back in maybe 2 years and I'll tell you the rest of the story.
If you want to work with us on solving it together, let us know through LinkedIn. We want to start a new group of like CIO whiteboarding sessions, virtual whiteboarding from our homes, where we all get together under chatting rules and just solve problems together.
That's a good idea, Helen. Ross, you wanted to jump in a little bit about data.
I mean, I think for the way we're approaching that is, and again, buzzwords, oh my gosh, but it really does come down to agile governance. I can't, you know, Sean, I totally understand that data dictionary, data catalogs and glossaries and things like that. But we have to, I think what we have to do is, when we're trying to shepherd our organization through this data journey, is we have to understand that we're not talking about data. We're talking about that data. What is it you're looking for, or what are you struggling to get? That data piece, that data point, that's the data that you're talking about. And if you're able to keep the conversation to that particularly valuable piece of data that somebody's looking for at that time and solve that problem, the more formal aspects of data governance, I think, develop over time as you solve kind of the trees in the forest. You attach some governance element to that. So do I need 10 hours to solve this data or reporting issue for you, or do I need 12 because I'm going to wrap it in some governance? And the same with the next one and the next one and the next one. Before you know it, you have a governance layer that is curating your data for you. So I think it's about understanding what the particularly valuable aspects of data are that your organization is looking for, and then building the governance into the delivery as you go.
Excellent, excellent. And John Thorpe makes a very good point here. Data is the fuel that AI depends on. And in most organizations today, that fuel is pretty dirty. So getting your ducks in a row, and I think that data governance is critical. The governance, I love that the dynamic adaptive governance that can work at the speed of technology and business is really critical. And I think most organizations require a governance refresh. I think it's important that the technology group, the CIO, is at the table of that data governance refresh. Okay, I'm going to
not governance for the sake of governance, though, right?
No, never governance for the sake of governance. I mean, let's do what makes sense and measure what matters, right?
Right.
I think the time here is getting down to a minimum in terms of how much time we have left. I think we could go for another 4 hours because we like talking to each other and you guys are so smart. What I'd love to do is go around the table. I'll start with Sean and then move to Helen and then to Ross. I'd like you to give me your last minute insights. What insights can you offer other people in the technology field who, based on both our learnings from last week, but also from just this conversation, what do you think are your key insights that you can offer?
Well, I think I can keep it pretty short and concise. I think for me, it's be curious, experiment, and above all, have fun. Life is way too short to be stressed and unhappy. And for me right now, and at a point in my career that I want to be part of an organization that is kind of moving the needle and having fun. And I say to anybody that asks me, I'm having the most fun I've ever had in my career right now. So I'll leave it at that. Be curious and have fun.
All right, Helen?
I'm going to use this moment for a call to action. A great way to grow your career and understand more what your executive peers and your board are looking for is to join a nonprofit board. I have to be fully transparent. I have a keynote called, Grow Your Career and Save the World in 5 Easy Steps. The first step isn't easy. Finding a board that values technology, that wants you on the board as a nonprofit is really challenging. So you may need to do training through the International Corporation of Directors. They have a nonprofit 2-day course. But by joining a nonprofit board and advocating for technology, and don't get sucked into building access databases with them. Really use your expertise to talk about and be a strategic partner for the next level and the strategic planning that we talked about right at the beginning of this hour. If I could inspire every senior leader to join a nonprofit board in any level of advisory capacity, I think will honestly improve the social fabric of the country. So please do.
Excellent. Ross?
And learn something along the way, no doubt. Hey, Helen. Yeah, exactly.
Learn, make a difference, apply your skills good.
I'm making notes as you're talking. So access is bad. Is that
access database? Honestly, that's just the old Gen AI, right? It's Access, SharePoint, Gen AI. Remember we hired all those summer students and they left, and 3 years later their Access databases broke and we didn't know anything. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. Gosh, we've all been there. Maybe it's a sign of age. Patty, I think in terms of a final insight, I would say that it's important for us as technology leaders to understand that we're moving out of a traditional territory where there's this kind of binary action or activity that we do about implementing something. You put a DVD in a server, next, and you have an application stood up that has identifiable boundaries around where it sits and what it does and how it operates. When we start moving into AI, generative AI, and data, we're moving into things that don't have clean boundaries, clean definitions of what done looks like, clean definitions of what clean looks like. All of those things now become gray. And the tie break on all of these things, one person will have an opinion about what good data is or data that's ready for Gen AI. Another person will have another opinion. The tie break is what is important and valuable to your organization. And I would say we just need to recognize that we're in this gray zone. We have to be comfortable with uncertainty. We have to be comfortable with losing sight of shore and not really knowing where we are from time to time. But we always have to have that tether attached to us of business.
Thank you. I think those insights are amazing, because I think understanding what are you trying to achieve as a business is really what IT is all about now. It really is more than just functional support, which is what we saw in years past. I believe moving forward, we need to have a better understanding of the multi-generations, the diversity, our soft skills, our interrelationships, our ability to really hone in on what's really human is a key and critical point in our organizations. And I think, Simone mentioned, how do you feel about C-level, seeing the criticality of their people being trained by their IT. I really think that IT has a large role to play in terms of emotional and social intelligence within the organization. And I think future leaders in IT really need to hone in on the humanity of what we have. As those are our gifts. That's what we bring to the organization. And the technology is our lever, right?
Yeah, that's very well said.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to have a few with low EQ in the basement helping you out, though, too. That only speaks to
That's awesome. I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this, for allowing me to take part in your event last week, for meeting so many people. And I heard over and over and over again that it is community that takes us where we need to go. And so Helen, with your whiteboarding, Sean, you talked about what Gaz mentioned in terms of our ability to really take a step back and really enjoy the journey because you're taking care of yourself. Ross, you talked about the criticality of the need for us to really understand the business. And all of you have mentioned, talking about the mission of the organization. I thank you for your time today. I really appreciate everything you've, shared with our folks out there, and appreciate all of you. I would like to give a shout out to the CIO Association of Canada for all of their hard work in helping us bring this to you today. And if you are in the technology world, please take a look at their new certification, CIO.D, which is a designation from, I believe, the Rotman School of Business that is brand new and starting up their second cohort in September. You can find Ross and Helen and Sean all on LinkedIn. Right below, you can find their profile links. I thank you ever so much for your time today.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you so much, Patty. Can I give you a shout out to your closing keynote at the peer forum for the CIO Association was spectacular. I'm sure many people watching obviously follow you, but if you do have the opportunity to participate and see one of Patty's keynotes, excellent, facilitating this meaningful conversation. And Ross, the chapter president for Calgary, who hosted the peer forum. I just showed up. It was great.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining our digital dialogue. Be sure to join our next digital dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.